You guys sitting in the front row in all my poli-sci classes.
I've got a question for Representative Burgess. Mr. Chairman, Representative Burgess, how would this affect my light bulb bill? Would it allow us to opt out of the compact light bulb mandate, and then wouldn't need my bill? Because I really want that bill to go through, and I don't need you undermining my light bulb bill with your 10th Amendment legislation. Would this have an effect on that bill?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Antonori, I don't see how.
Oh, good.
Mr. Chabin, you had a question for the sponsor?
I do, in two specific areas, Mr. Chairman, Representative Burgess. The Constitution defines our role with the federal government, the state of Arizona, and that's interpreted by the United States Supreme Court. So what benefit would passing this have, given since our very beginning as a nation, that relationship has been defined?
It's just a postcard from us.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chabin, you know, of course, that when the Constitution was created, the Supreme Court, the executive, and the judicial branch were all created separately. And that was to create a balance of power within the Constitution. So basically what happened is that we, the states, created the federal government. The federal government did not create states. And because each one of the different departments, executive, judicial, and you know what, right now it just eludes my brain.
Legislative. That's us.
Are to be separate and have equal powers.
And so my point is, Representative Burgess, Mr. Chairman, and I want to get to another area of the law. My point is that we did give the power, all the states, and in fact, when the United States was created under the three branches, giving the authority of the United States Supreme Court to be the final arbiter between the relationships, let me finish, between the states and the nation, and the states between each other. We were a state petitioning to be part of that Constitution. And I hear a whole lot of this discussion when I hear about these emails from the Republic from Arizona and the 10th Amendment. Sometimes I get the feeling that there are people who want to unstitch the Arizona star from the United States flag. And that's what I sense every now and again about this independence. And I have another area of the law. You've read the Arizona Constitution. Do you remember reading that portion about the counties having the authority to establish a hospital?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chabin, it's been a long time since I was in 8th grade and studied the Constitution.
No, this is the Arizona Constitution.
Well, it's been a long time since I've studied the Arizona Constitution.
But there is a clause in the Arizona Constitution that provides that Arizona counties have the authority to establish a hospital, and you know why. It was to heal indigent people when they got sick. I mean, that was a pioneer value. That's not socialism. So do you realize that when we have access in the federal role, that the federal government pays $2 of every $3 we spend on that Arizona constitutional provision of healing people who are indigent? And if this would pass, and if we would take it seriously, that would probably end up increasing the property taxes, at least in Coconino County, twofold.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chabin.
Burgess.
You know, one of the things that it said was, it's not my money to give. You know, as a taxpayer of the state of Arizona, I have obligations. My obligations fall under the Constitution, and those things are to do the things for people that they cannot do for themselves, and one of those is protection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Burgess.
Yeah, I had a point to that point, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
To the first point with the Supreme Court being the supreme decision maker, I understand through my history books, reading them, that the Founding Fathers, many of them, believed that all three had the right to interpret. And in fact, it was 1803 Mulberry versus Madison, which kind of threw it into the court's favors, and we've been going down that road ever since, to where they pretty much dictated constitutionality. And within my Constitution, I'm looking at Article 3 here, and I don't see how it doesn't say that they're the supreme entity and all. In fact, it gives you certain powers, actually. It tells you different, that they affect ambassadors, other public ministers, counselors, states and parties between, but they don't go down into law and dictate to the states themselves. And that's what our 10th Amendment was there to block. The 10th Amendment was there to dictate what was already established in the Constitution. The Constitution itself says, basically on its own, without the 10th Amendment, that anything that is not within that Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, is guaranteed to the states. The 10th Amendment gives it that extra backing, and that's why they did that, because the states were afraid of what's happening right now.
And let me answer. My point is that from the beginning of our Constitution, within a decade certainly, there have been challenges about the role of the states versus the role of the federal, and who had what role, and which had a responsibility, including the federal income tax. All of those things have been challenged by the courts and been defined by the United States Supreme Court. Whether we agree with the decision or not, we may disagree with what the Supreme Court, but it's been defined. And just as important as it is to, that's all considered what is constitutional and not. When we talk about the Constitution, whether it's the 10th Amendment or subsequent decisions by the Supreme Court, when we pledge allegiance to that flag, we pledge allegiance to all of it, even if it makes us unhappy. Now, it can make you all feel good to pass this resolution, but it won't change the Constitution.
Back to that point there, I think this is what she's going to do, is define back that this state defines the 10th Amendment, that we are sovereign, unless the United States Constitution dictates we are not in certain areas, which you would be discussing. Now, the Supreme Court, if we just leave it to the Supreme Court, which is the federal government, then why don't we just make no states and have one state, which is the United States?
Mr. Chairman, that would lead Minnesota to define it along with Arizona maybe a little differently, and maybe Iowa, and maybe Alabama, and maybe New York, and then, of course, there's California. And if they're defining everything, would make all of us a lot of happy. You know, I think the truth is that is why we have a Supreme Court. That is why we have a United States Congress. That is what makes us all one. We may not like certain provisions that come down from Arizona, but that's the way it is. So anyhow, I've made my arguments, and I hope you appreciate it, Representative Burgess. It's just an argument.
Mr. Chairman,
so.
thank you, Mr. Chabin.